Hey y'all, I'm Ashley. I'm an indie Christian fantasy writer, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going over one of my all-time favorite books, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. This is the start of my mini-series going over all the books from the Chronicles of Narnia in publication order, so be sure to subscribe and hit that like button to not miss the rest of the series. Today's book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, is very nostalgic for me. I read this book so many times as a kid that I genuinely don't remember not being a fan of Narnia. The 2005 movie adaptation was actually the first movie that my parents saw in theaters after I was born. So yeah, Narnia is a very big part of my family. That said, before getting into the rest of this video, please know that this is a summary of the book, so there will be spoilers if you have not read this. You don't need to read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe to watch this video, but if you do want to read it spoiler-free, pause this video, go read it, and come back. Now let's get into The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The story of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe centers on four siblings named Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, who are from the city of London, but they must be sent away because of the World War II air raids. And they're sent to this big house in the English countryside owned by the old and pretty mysterious Professor Kirk. One day, after settling in, the siblings decide we're going to explore this manor. So they do, and eventually they come across a room that only has a wardrobe in it, completely empty other than that. So none of the siblings are interested because it's a wardrobe. There's nothing much there. But Lucy, who really likes fur coats, decides to take a look around in the wardrobe. So she walks into it and realizes pretty quickly that this is an unusually big wardrobe. And wait, are those fur coats or are those pine needles? And lo and behold, she steps out into Narnia. So Lucy steps out into the Narnian woods. She's obviously very scared, very confused, but she's very excited. So she keeps exploring until she finds a lamppost. At the lamppost, she runs into a fawn who's carrying an umbrella and a bunch of packages. Which, incidentally, the picture of a fawn carrying an umbrella, packages by a lamppost is what inspires C.S. Lewis to write The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which led to the rest of the series. So Mr. Tumnus invites Lucy to his house, and he gives her dinner, he plays his flute for her, and he's telling her all these great things about Narnia, and she doesn't realize that she's been there for hours until she does. And she's like, I've been here too long, I need to go back. And Tumnus tells her, you can't go back. Lucy's obviously very scared by what Tumnus said, and is wondering what's going on, why can't I go back home? So Tumnus tells her about the evil White Witch, who is the Queen of Narnia. She's the one who makes it always winter and never Christmas, and she has been doing this for the past 100 years. She's also doesn't want any humans in Narnia, so she has certain of the Narnians kidnap any humans that they might see. Well, Lucy is the first one that Tumnus has ever seen, but he's also one of the kidnappers for her. But seeing Lucy and that she's good, and she's not what the White Witch portrayed humans to be, he decides, I have to help her. I can't serve the White Witch in this way. So he sneaks her back to the lamppost, where she finds her way back to the wardrobe and comes out. Now, one of the first things Lucy sees after coming out of the wardrobe are her siblings right where she left them. She's a little confused, but she's more concerned about telling them what happened than that they're still there. So she tells them that there's this magical wood in the wardrobe, and that there's a fawn, and there's an evil witch, and there's a lamppost, and all these things that happened to her. They don't believe her, but they're like, she's pretty convinced by this, let's still check it out. Weirder things have happened, I guess. Although, when they check the wardrobe, there's nothing there. So obviously they don't believe her, and Edmund's the most bratty about it. Now her other siblings, especially Peter and Susan, think this is very weird. This is not like Lucy at all, but it's fine. Like, it's just a one-off, no big deal. So life goes on until they decide to play a game of hide and seek. And Lucy doesn't really want to set them off again, but she also wants to look in the wardrobe just in case there's something there, and hey, she'd have plenty of time to hide anyway. So she goes in, but Edmund follows her. Again, to be a brat, because that's who Edmund is at this point in the story. But they both get into Narnia. Now, Lucy doesn't realize that Edmund also got into Narnia, so she goes straight to Mr. Tumnus's house. Edmund doesn't know how to get there, so he's just wandering around by the lamppost, yelling for Lucy, thinking she's being a brat for not answering him, but she can't hear him to answer. Well, that's when the White Witch finds him. So the White Witch invites Edmund onto her sleigh, and she treats him very kindly. She gives him food, she makes him warm, but what he doesn't know is that the Turkish delight he asked for is enchanted, and that will make Edmund more likely to follow the witch. So they start talking, and Edmund tells her about his family, that he has one brother and two sisters. And she's very interested in this and keeps circling back. You have one brother and two sisters, or you have three siblings, or there's four in your family. And Edmund keeps confirming this. He thinks it's a little weird, but he's way too interested in his Turkish delight to think anything of it. So the conversation goes on until the queen says, I want you to be the next king of Narnia. So you need to come to my castle. But we can't go there now because your siblings need to come. And Edmund just accepts it because, hey, I want to be king. So the White Witch tells Edmund how to get to her castle before she leaves. This is when Lucy comes back. So Lucy's all excited because, hey, Edmund's in there too. Peter and Susan will have to believe me now. And Edmund's really not sure what to feel about this. He's kind of feeling sick after eating the witch's food. And, oh, I'm going to have to admit I was wrong in front of my older siblings. So they go find Peter and Susan. It takes a minute because they are still playing hide and seek, but they do find them. And Lucy says, Narnia's all real. Edmund came with me. It's real. And Peter and Susan are like, okay, Edmund, is this true? And Edmund's like, no, we were playing. So Lucy is obviously very upset by what Edmund said, and she runs out of the room. Peter and Susan, but especially Peter, are now really angry, really frustrated with Edmund for being such a brat. Because why else would he be making fun of Lucy for leaving in Narnia, but then go right along with it and play with her? Well, they see this is getting way outside of their control, so they go and talk to the professor about it. Well, after hearing what Peter and Susan have to say about Lucy, the professor has a very interesting response. And I'm going to read this straight out of the book because I love the way C.S. Lewis words this. There are only three possibilities. Either your sister is telling lies, or she is mad, or she's telling the truth. You know that she doesn't tell lies, and it's obvious she is not mad. For the moment then, and unless any further evidence shows up, we must assume that she's telling the truth. Susan looked at him very hard, and was quite sure from the expression on his face that he was not making fun of them. But Peter and Susan are obviously taken aback by this, and they're even more shocked when the professor straight up tells them he wouldn't be surprised if there were portals to other worlds in his house because it's just such a weird house. Well, they don't really have much else to do from this conversation other than keep Edmund from being too much of a brat to Lucy. So life for the Pevensey siblings goes on like this for a while, the older two keeping Edmund from being too much of a brat to Lucy. Until Mrs. McCready, the housekeeper, has a group of tourists she's showing around the house. Again, this is very old, very famous, very historic home, so people want to come and see it. But that also means the Pevensey siblings have to keep out of their way. And everywhere they go, they just hear Mrs. McCready and her group of tourists coming. They think it's weird, but eventually they're forced into the wardrobe room because there's nowhere else. And they're thinking, oh, we're safe here. There's no way she's going to bring tourists into the wardrobe room because it's literally just a wardrobe. Until they hear the door opening. Having no other choice, the Pevensey siblings all climb into the wardrobe. And, oh, we're in Narnia. Since they decide to stay, they take a few of the fur coats from the wardrobe. And the older siblings apologize to Lucy, and Edmund lets it slip that he's been there before by saying something about the lamppost. Well, they decide to put Lucy in charge since they've been kind of annoying to her over this. and she takes them to Tumnus's house, where they find it's been wrecked by the witch. While at Tumnus's house, they're found by a beaver, actually Mr. Beaver, and he takes him to his dam where he and Mrs. Beaver treat them to a fish dinner and tell them all about the White Witch, the prophecies about them, and Aslan. They don't know who Aslan is, but they all have different reactions to them. And I'm going to read this section from the book because I think it's really important in understanding the story. At the name of Aslan, each one of the children felt something jump inside. Edmund felt a sensation of mysterious horror. Peter felt suddenly brave and adventurous. Susan felt as if some delicious smell or delightful strain of music had just floated by her. And Lucy got the feeling that you have when you wake up in the morning and realize it's the beginning of the holidays or the beginning of summer. And so Mr. Beaver tells them about Aslan, the true king of Narnia, who's also a lion. And when the kids hear this, they're obviously pretty concerned because it's a lion, it's not a human. So they ask if he's safe. And Mr. Beaver says, "Safe? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you." And that's one of the themes throughout the Book of Narnia as relating to Aslan, that he is good, but he's not safe. So after explaining this, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver tell them about the prophecies that were written about them. When Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sits a Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil time will be over and done. So after telling them about Aslan and their destinies in Narnia, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver tell the Pevensey siblings about the White Witch, that she's evil and she's terrible for Narnia. And then they realize Edmund's missing. So Mr. Beaver determines that Edmund has gone to be with the White Witch because he's been acting weird this whole time, and he had been in Narnia before without saying what he did. So because of this, they have to leave as quick as they can. So Edmund makes it to the White Witch's castle, and he finds statues everywhere. At first, he was confused by this because he forgot that the beavers told him that the witch had this power, but then he realized that they're all statues because, oh, these animals aren't moving. He even mistakes a lion statue for one of Aslan before talking to the White Witch. When he tells her what he's been up to, she's furious because he didn't bring his family all the way. He tells her it's the best that he could do, and she decides to make the best of it by grabbing her sleigh and taking Edmund with her. So the Pevensey siblings, along with Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, make their way to the stone table where Aslan's camp is. While on the way there, they run into Father Christmas, or the British version of Santa Claus. And he gives Peter a sword and a shield with a red lion on it. Susan gets a bow and arrow along with a horn that will bring her help no matter where she is. And Lucy gets a dagger and a healing cordial. He tells the beavers that they'll get some practical gifts at their dam, and he leaves them some food. After walking a really long way, the Pevensey siblings and Mr. and Mrs. Beaver make it to the stone table. Meanwhile, Edmund is seeing firsthand the wickedness of the witch. Father Christmas had given a group of Narnian animals a party, and when Edmund and the witch came across them, she turned them into stone. The witch, the dwarf, and the Edmund are also having to walk instead of riding the sleigh because the snow is melting. So once they're in Aslan's camp, the Pevensey siblings talk to him about rescuing their brother. He agrees to help them. However, Lucy and Susan are attacked by the wolves that the witch had sent to kill them. Peter saves his sisters by killing one of the wolves, and Aslan knights him for this. The other wolf is allowed to escape so that he can show Aslan's army where the witch is. Meanwhile, the witch and her dwarf are discussing whether or not they should just straight up kill Edmund or if they should let him be ransomed, but that would mean the prophecies about the Pevensies would be fulfilled, so they decide to kill him. Meanwhile, at this time, the section of Aslan's army comes and attacks. They rescue Edmund, but they miss the witch and her dwarf because she uses their magic to shield them from the Narnians. Edmund is brought back to Aslan's camp, and Aslan speaks to him, though nobody knows about what. The witch comes to meet Aslan because Edmund was stolen from her in her eyes. The witch claims that Edmund is hers by right of the deep magic, which is something that Aslan's father had established as a ruling system over Narnia. Aslan privately comes to an agreement with the witch, and she leads to the sound of his epic roar. Everything seems to be going alright, but they have to make camp somewhere else besides the stone table as part of the agreement with Aslan and the witch. After changing their camp locations, Susan and Lucy can't sleep that night, and when Aslan walks by their tent, they decide to follow him. He lets them join, but says they have to leave whenever he says to. Well, Aslan leads Susan and Lucy back to the stone table where the witch's army is waiting. Susan and Lucy are told to hide, and they do so as Aslan goes up to the table. Well, the witch and her army bind, shave his mane, and kill him. And they all leave with the witch saying that they need to go fight Aslan's army to take Narnia. Susan and Lucy are obviously very shaken by what just happened, but they go up to the stone table after the witch's army left and try to remove the ropes from Aslan as a last way to honor him. But they can't because the ropes were tied so tight. But some mice come and chew off the ropes, thinking that Aslan is still alive and that it will help him. Well, Susan and Lucy grieve the rest of the night, but when morning comes, they decide they need to go back to camp. As they're walking away, they hear a huge cracking sound and turn around to see Aslan alive. They rejoice, and Aslan explains about the deeper magic that broke the stone table and brought him back to life. Aslan then tells them that they need to go to the witch's castle, and they ride on Aslan there. Well, they enter the witch's castle, and they see all the statues that Edmund also saw earlier. Well, Aslan goes and breathes on the statues, and he brings them back to life. There's all sorts of Narnian creatures and warriors there, so they gather everyone up and go and join Peter and Edmund in the battle against the witch. By the time they get to the battle, there's a bunch of statues already there, but it doesn't look like the witch is making any more statues, interestingly. And the remains of Aslan's army is fighting the much larger witch's army. Peter is directly fighting the witch, and Edmund's wounded. With Aslan's appearance, they quickly come and defeat the witch. Lucy heals all the wounded soldiers in Aslan's army, starting with her brother Edmund. Peter then tells Aslan what happened in the battle, that the only reason they'd managed to survive until Aslan came was because of Edmund breaking the witch's wand, which allowed her to turn people into stone, even though he did get wounded for that. Then they go to Cair Paravel, the castle of the Four Thrones, where the Pevensey children will rule from, as foretold in the prophecies, and where Aslan crowns them, kings and queens of Narnia. He leads them to rule, and over the years that they rule, they set Narnia to right as much as they can. Years pass, and they're hunting the white stag and come across the lamppost. They're trying to figure out where they remember seeing this lamppost before, but it takes them a minute. And once they do, they leave their horses and find their way back to the wardrobe, where they turn back into kids from England. And as C.S. Lewis writes, that would have been the end of the story, except the four Pevensey kids felt the need to explain to Professor Kirk why he would be missing 4 coats from the upstairs wardrobe. And I'm going to read this line from the book because I think it explains Professor Kirk's reaction very well. And the professor, who was a very remarkable man, didn't tell them not to be silly or not to tell lies, but believe the whole story. In the rest of the conversation, we see that Professor Kirk is very, and for the Pevensey, surprisingly chill about the fact that he lost 4 coats and all this, but he tells them to keep their eyes open, and that they will probably find other people who have had similar adventures. And he encourages them by saying that they will go to Narnia again, because after all, once a king or queen in Narnia, always a king or queen in Narnia. So what do you all think about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Have you read it before, or have I convinced you to update your TBR list? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.